Why do some Christians make common cause with non-Christians, while others seem to want to work only within the Christian world? That seems like an especially timely question right now. And no surprise, H. Richard Niebuhr's Christ in Culture offers us some insight. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, August 9th, 2024. By the way, if I sound a little funny, it's because I had a crown put in the lower left of my mouth, and I'm still a little numb. So it begins with a particular understanding of God in relation to the created order. I know that sounds pretty cosmic, but it has very down-to-earth effects. So, for some Christians, creation is understood to be the realm of sin and corruption without any redeeming qualities. But for the conversionist Christians, those who resemble what Niebuhr calls the Christ transformer of culture type, the whole of creation, though broken and flawed, remains ultimately good. Flawed, a corrupted version of what God originally intended, but ultimately good. And that applies to the whole of creation, including culture. Now, to be sure, culture is also broken and flawed. It is, after all, a human artifact. But like human beings, there remains the essential features of God's good creations. And this includes not only those who are Christians and those institutions that are self-described Christian organizations, but all people and all institutions. It's why, for example, Paul could write in his letter to the Romans, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist have been instituted by God." Conversionists, therefore, do not look at the world in binary terms. It's not a Christian versus non-Christian world. This is not to say that one's Christian faith is unimportant. It is. It is to say that because conversionists understand the entire world to belong to God, regardless of religiosity, they are relatively comfortable making common cause with people of other religious traditions and even people of no particular faith at all. And conversionists are as comfortable in the world of non-religious institutions as they are in the world of religious institutions. Niebuhr's name for this type, conversionist, can actually be a little misleading. Conversionists are not necessarily trying to Christianize non-religious institutions. They're not trying to create Christian governments. Instead, their hope is to bring Christian sensibilities into all parts of culture. So, for example, Christians in the late 19th and early 20th century America were in the vanguard of efforts to ban child labor in the workplace, establish a minimum wage for hourly labor, a 40-hour work week, and many other things that we now take for granted, but were relatively progressive ideas at the time. And it wasn't because they were motivated by progressive political ideas. They were motivated by the awareness of human suffering in the economic realm, and they were willing to partner with anyone who agreed on that part of their agenda. They were willing to work with people inside and outside the Christian faith to accomplish these ends. Because they are willing to engage the larger culture, conversionists sometimes find themselves at odds with people who fit into some of Niebuhr's other types. Clearly, they are often at odds with the against culture type. And while they may sometimes resemble the of culture type, they still ultimately judge the world against the measuring stick of Scripture and Christian tradition. As an example of this type at work, John Calvin stands out. In his signature work, The Institutes of the Christian Religion, Calvin frequently borrows from Greek and Roman philosophers, in addition to Christian writers and Scripture. For example, Calvin makes frequent reference to Cicero, calling him the, quote, eminent pagan. Obviously, he often criticizes ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, as he does some early Christian writers, but just as often he uses them to construct his theological system. So, unlike some of their fellow Christians, conversionists tend to be comfortable operating in and cooperating with people and institutions outside the church, and can find the and can find the outright rejection of these same people and institutions by other Christians as off-putting and even offensive. Because at the end of the day, the conversionist agrees with the psalmist. The earth is the Lord's, and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. Because the whole of creation belongs to God, including those who do not know God or acknowledge God's rule, conversionists are at home in all parts of God's world. Tomorrow, we'll finish our walk through Niebuhr's Christ and Culture with a concluding postscript. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.